It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to the October programme of Learning Now TV. Hopefully we've got more surprise and delights than Halloween frights. Nigel, what's on the show?
Well, I hope there aren't any Halloween frights, Kate. I'd be very scared. If something jumps out from the cupboard behind me, you'll be the first. You'll know before I do.
If there's any spiders, I'm out of here.
Oh. Let's just talk about what's on the show today. And we've got, as always, some really interesting and contrasting interviews this time. Firstly, Mike Bollinger. Mike is a senior director in Cornerstone. You know him very well, Kate. But what he's talking about is something fascinating, and it's the latest version of the Talent Health Index, which Cornerstone sponsor. And basically looking at how people are doing, how they feel about their organizations and how well they're being looked after and how well organizations meet the expectations of their organization. Really valuable piece of work, fascinating results. And Mike and I had a very, very good talk about that. Next is Emma Stenman. Robin Hoyle talks to Emma about teams. She's from Sweden, and he's talking about how any team of any size can function successfully. Just need a few tricks. And Emma has the tricks. And then Claire Madeley. I spoke to Claire about facilitation. Claire spends her life facilitating teams and small groups. And we talked about what makes great facilitation, how does facilitation work, and how you can get better at facilitation. It's really good, short interview with Claire, and I'm very grateful for her for sharing some of her expertise. And Stella, we come to the very last of the neuroscience contributions. And this is something that I really should pay a lot of attention to. It's called Why We Forget. And I wish I knew the answer because I forget a lot of things. So talking about forgetting and how it's good to forget, but it's also good occasionally to remember. Plus, Rob Clark's back again with his learning news, updates, takeovers, mergers, general sin and scandal in the L&D industry. That's it, Kate.
Well, I think if there's not something for everyone there, then I don't know what we're doing. So I think we've got everything there from sort of strategic, practical, right down to what's happening in the news. So enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show, and no spiders. I've got in my hands a really interesting brand new report. It's called the Talent Health Index report for 2023. And sitting in front of me is the author, Mike Bollinger. And Mike is the Global VP of Strategic Initiatives at Cornerstone On Demand. And they are indeed the publisher of this report. But before we dig into it, Mike, first of all, welcome. It's wonderful to talk to you again. Tell us a little bit about Cornerstone.
Well, Cornerstone's a long name, long been in the industry as a name, but it's gone through several versions of evolution. And at the point now, we're over 7,000 customers, 100 million users, nearly 5,000 employees, and every 3 seconds, somebody worldwide is engaging with our content. Nearly 1% of the planet's taking a course on one of our products every 3 seconds. So, and on top of that, Cornerstone is well known for its fierce specialization in talent development and talent management, and focus on what we call the talent experience platform, with end-to-end seamless experience associated with development and both the employer perspective as well as the employee perspective. And that's what what spurred the notion of this research when we originally started an original version in 2020. And thank you for the notation on authorship. I do want to give a shout out to my partner, Annalise Delgado, who worked heavily with me in this and is a continuing partner along the way.
Tell us about this report. And as I said to you, I found it very interesting and very helpful. But can you summarize and highlight the bits that you think we should be focusing on when we all download this report? And we'll put a link up at the end so that you can use the QR code or use the link and you can have this report.
So I have to do a little bit of a history here. So in 2020, we started with the first iteration. It's a global report. So it's important to know that this report has both an employee perspective and an employer perspective. And in 2020, we dug into skills perspective, and it happened right as the pandemic hit. So it was a really interesting time from a sentiment perspective. And so we discovered in 2020 something we called the skills confidence gap. And what that really means is employers are saying, we believe that we're making an investment in skills and development for our employees. And employees were saying globally, with some differences, and we can talk about that, I'm not so sure I can consume it. That gap or that confidence that we found in 2020 was statistically significant. So we repeated the survey in 2021, and we added a new dimension, the notion of a high-performing organization. And so what we found is that confidence gap persisted. And again, this is both a confidence and a capability gap. We asked the questions two different ways to ensure that happened, that we're not off in our finding. And then what we found in 2021 was that high-performing organizations, that gap nearly shrunk to zero. So again, statistically significant in the sense that high-performing organizations appeared to be more aligned. And one of the clean findings there was that high-performing organizations were doing several things, not just one thing, but several things. So then in 2022, we did a parallel piece around talent mobility because we wanted to think a little bit around this gap and what high-performing organizations were doing in the 2021 report. And what we found was the gap itself and the mobility that went with it matched. So when we asked people about mobility, we found things like employees wanting to interact with solutions first before they talk to their managers. And that was a practice in the mobility report. Okay, now to the report we're talking about this year. So there's this continuation of the research that we've done. So in 2023, we continued to maintain the employee perspective, over 1,400 of them globally, the employer perspective, over 700 of them globally, and then the high performance perspective. In other words, we continued with the high performer, and then we added a diagnostic tool known as the Talent Health Index, because the idea behind this was we know this exists, we know there are some best practices. Let's create a measurement tool, a diagnostic tool, and we wanted to do that in a way that allowed an individual organization to assess for themselves what they were doing and directionally find what they might want to do next. And that yielded the Talent Health Index, which is associated with a Cornerstone maturity model. So we released the research, which I believe is fascinating, not just because we wrote it, but I really enjoy the research itself and what we found. But in addition to that, we released a diagnostic tool, which I believe you have the QR code, so that people can take this for themselves.
So thank you very much for that. And I think that so in some ways that diagnostic is the new thing that you've developed for 2023. Is that right?
Yeah. But the important point for the audience is, as we kept peeling this onion, we said, okay, we know that high-performing organizations do things like gig assignments internally, allow people to explore things that interest them. Let's dig in even deeper and create a diagnostic tool so people can look at it for themselves.
Let's just dig into the report. What is slightly depressing is that you talk about you look at the major gap between I feel confident in my ability, our ability to develop skills. So in 2020, that confidence gap was 30%. it went up to 31% in 22. Now it's down to 29%. It's not shifting. It's not shifting, except in your high-performing organizations, where what you get is 92% have confidence in talent and development initiative. But what I think is even more interesting is that little statistic next to it. 96% believe their employer cares about them and their growth. So it's not just about I feel capable. It's I feel cared about. I feel that my employer wants me to be there, and therefore I guess the corollary of that is I will perform. I will give more of my effort than I would have done in an employer where I don't believe they care about me, and I don't think they care about my growth. So my performance as an individual is locked into their performance as an organization. And that does seem to me to be a slam dunk here. What do you think?
I do. And one of the things, obviously the obvious question now in this high performing organization is what makes a high performing organization. And it's important to know that it's 16 different dimensions. It's not just what's my turnover like, although that's part of it. It's also things like revenue performance and productivity, customer satisfaction. And so it's 16 dimensions that create this high-performing organization. So then when you look at this confidence and capability gap, remember we ask it two different ways. We ask about the employer confidence and employee confidence, and then we ask about the employer confidence in their capability, which is what you were talking about from the employee perspective. So that 98 to 92, that 6%, that's literally insignificant statistically speaking. But the other thing globally and on average that was interesting is when we originally started that research, the two cohorts were higher. So even though the gap has stayed pretty consistent, each individual benchmark of confidence and capability has come down a little bit. So what that tells me is, and that's one of the reasons we use the diagnostic tool, there may be a little bit of fatigue here because we're both working very hard as employers and employees. Yet what we find is that we're still not making the effort that we want to. Another point, and then I'll stop. Because I could talk about this all day, Nigel, is that we also have the laggards. So whenever you do research, you have your average and then you have your standard deviations, right? That's the bell curve we're all used to. So although it's always interesting to look at the high performers, the laggards on the other side of the bell curve, it's very, very interesting as well. And those laggards, the high performers on the overall maturity model that's part of this diagnostic, we're 25% lower overall. That's really significant. So
that is very significant.
That confidence gap, it persists, but not in the high performing organizations. It continues to shrink, which tells me alignment.
You talk about your tip is about AI and machine learning to glean insights from data and make learning more personalized. Just talk a little bit about that because everyone's talking about AI. How do you think that can work in the context that we've just been discussing?
So I think one of the things to be mindful of is when we say AI, there are several iterations of that within
it's more complicated than just AI. Yeah,
it's not just Gen AI, right? Although that we've all heard about that. I think the adoption curve for Gen AI is even faster than Pokemon Go.
Yeah,
so
it is extraordinary.
That's one of the things to be mindful of. But AI as a component of what we do inside HR Tech. When you think about the mobility report and people saying, I want to explore for myself first before I talk to my manager, which is a different, interesting finding, it's because AI has enabled that over the years. And even though we know that it has an impact, and I'll give a really good example, skills, we could do skills and gap analysis in the mid-2000s, but the technology couldn't keep it evergreen. It cratered under its own weight. AI has allowed for that to be much more refresh rate, to be more personalized and those kinds of things. And not just to personalize, but also to indicate things I'm not interested in. So AI is a significant advantage when it comes to high-performing organizations, yet even high-performing organizations are still only at 52% of full AI adoption. So that's an opportunity for HR organizations in particular, even the high performers.
Yeah. So AI, you're seeing it at two levels. On one level, it's like an organizational monitoring system. It's keeping a watch on the organization and flagging up trends and issues and so on. And also, it's there for the individual to help personalize what they need and give them a kind of roadmap for the future seamlessly without anyone having to intervene or anyone having to do a lot of data crunching. That will all be done by the AI. Is that right? Do you see it on those two dimensions?
Yeah, I do. Whenever I think about transformation and transformation initiatives with people, I always think about it from a simplified perspective: have, want, need, right? Have. Yep. What do I have? Where's my visibility? And have isn't just in skills, it's in all kinds of things. AI and machine learning can help with what do I have? That's the visibility and the insight. And then there's a part of it, again, with AI and machine learning, is what do I need? And I think you're going to hear more and more as time goes by around strategic-based, skills-based strategic planning, because now that's a need perspective and the external ability to look at my ecosystem has improved. And then there's the want. And the want really is that employee perspective. That's why we do the research the way that we do, because the employee has their own desires and their own aspirations. So if you provide a have, want, need framework, that's one of the advantages we see within the high-performing organizations. But we do know there are areas of investment that even the high performers can make. And one of those in more AI and machine learning.
Yes, and what will be fascinating is to come back next year when we've had a year of an explosion of investment in AI and machine learning.
I agree.
See whether that moves the needle. That would be fascinating. So this is a really relevant and incredibly for the moment report. As I say, the QR codes and the links are on the screen. I would think you'd be missing a trick if you don't take down the report and then also do the survey. Both of those things work together. And thank you, Cornerstone On Demand, for keeping this research live over 3 or 4 years. And we'll watch this space. It's a very important space. We'll watch it with great interest. So,
one last thing for your audience to look for is also in that research is where the investment is going, and the high performers are investing sooner and faster than the laggards. Go look for that in the research as well.
Yes, and in a fast-changing world, that becomes critical, doesn't it? It's much more important now than it might have been, 5 years ago or whatever. Mike, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality-assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
As ever, the learning market doesn't stay still. There's mergers, there's moves, there's investment, all sorts of exciting things happening. Rob Clark has it all in his latest roundup.
Happiness at work, unpaid working hours and changing jobs. We have the latest on employment in L&D. A new brand and direction for Thrive, from bold to refined. Its co-founder is here to explain. Learning Network Connect is back this November in London with fresh thinking on the hottest workplace learning topics. Tom McDowell is here with what's in store. The The learning platform Thrive has announced new investment, new senior positions, all new product development and a whole new brand and new direction. So a lot of change. What's driven it and why?
We're getting to a point now where we're feeling much more confident about the work that we're doing, and that element of confidence and maturity, we just didn't feel that was there in the brand that we had. Do we take this as an opportunity to look at the brand and maybe come up with something new? And there's always that question of like, well, is it the right thing to focus on? Actually, as we explored that and we realized, that brand, it helps us to communicate who we are and what our mission is to our own teams, which as we scale and we've got more people working on the services that we offer and for our customers, that's a really important thing to make sure that we've got aligned. And then, of course, it also communicates out to the marketplace who we are and what we stand for. And it felt like the right time to do it and a really important kind of moment to just reflect on, we've reached this point and we are now this kind of mature, confident organization that's delivering impact.
This is a deep change in how you present yourselves.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about the way in which we're working and the kinds of projects and customers that we're working with, large numbers of learners, and all of that has kind of necessitated that we start to operate in a different way and really think more strategically about how we make sure that we can scale.
Nick Bate from Blue Eskimo is back with more from this year's Work and Salary Survey. Today, he's looking at the downward trend in unpaid working hours and how happy people are working in learning and development.
Rob, a significant proportion of L&D professionals regularly work extra hours unpaid, but the trend is downwards. So this year it was 56%, last year it was 62%. So if we look at the years prior to the pandemic, the number was actually higher, typically 65 to 75%. And even going back to 2015, it was 85%, which is quite surprising.
There's a remarkable statistic around how happy learning professionals are. How has this changed in the last year?
Yeah, it gets better and better, Rob, in this respect. It's a very upbeat statistic. We found this year that 88% of learning professionals are either quite happy or very happy in their job, which is obviously great news. This is also our highest percentage to date. In contrast to this, 2021 was our lowest ever happiness score, actually, just 61%. This could be in part due to the effects of the pandemic, which, don't forget, in 2021 was still causing a lot of upheaval, company restructures, a lot of angst. And at the end of the day, if you're not happy in general, then you're not likely to be happy at work either.
Thank you. And just drilling in a little bit further into that, you've also found this year that people in learning and development are now less likely to change jobs. Perhaps this, as we've been discussing, is the economic background. What's the data showing about people moving to new jobs?
Yeah, you're right, Rob. There was a slight decrease in people saying that they're likely to change jobs. That was the actual phrasing of the question, actually, likely to. So it's quite a firm question, really. It was down from 47% in 2021 to 41% this time around. I expect, again, that the economic downturn is now playing a part. When there are less vacancies around, there are obviously less opportunities to choose from and to move jobs. Could also be seen as a bigger risk to move jobs if your current role is secure, even if you're not that happy in it. But when you consider the question, I think that it's still quite a high proportion of people, nearly half of respondents, who think that it's likely they'll change jobs within the next year. Also, of interest this year, the main reason for people to look to move jobs was better career progression opportunities. That was actually up from 15 to 20%. Whereas in prior surveys, a better salary has consistently topped the list of reasons.
Learning Network Connect is back this November with fresh thinking and debate on the hottest workplace learning topics. How might we harness AI and extended reality? And how can L&D help to lead the sustainability agenda?
Our theme is building the future of L&D, sharing the very best ideas and challenges and kind of helping each other to move forwards. Got Michelle Parry-Slater and Steve Wheeler, experienced keynote speakers, but with really quite specific views on L&D and the direction of travel and where we should be putting our focus and energy. So two kind of, maybe one quite technology and one quite human focused there. And that's really the split that we see across the day. Because yes, we've got panels on how do we utilize AI and where's the value in extended reality technologies, but we also then have panels on how do we foster the talent and the skills that we need to kind of help organizations face the challenges they're now facing, research into adaptive learning, and how do we make sure accessibility never gets lost, that human element that is the very heart of what L&D does. It's very practical, very what can we do, not what can we ponder upon for another couple of years.
That's Learning News this October. Thank you to Nick Bate from Blue Eskimo, Mark Ward from Thrive, and Tom McDowell from the Learning Network. You've just watched 1 Minute Bulletins here. The full news features on employment in L&D, Thrive's new brand, and Connect 2023 are on the website. Follow the links in the programme notes. Next month, Learning News is reporting from the CIPD conference in Manchester and Connect in London, and I hope to see you at one of those events. For now, it's back to Nigel and Kate.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see, this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
This month I'm joined by Emma Stenman. Emma is a part of the learning design team for Promote International. They're based in Stockholm. And as well as having a platform which Emma helps organisations to utilise, it's much more about the way in which learning is designed and how organisations can engage with their people on learning and development activities, which move much beyond the genuine intervention. So, good day, Emma. How are you? And I hope everything is fine in Stockholm today.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, I'm very fine. I hope everything is good with you. Yeah, sun is shining. It's a little bit chilly, starting to be autumn, but everything is well.
Well, that's absolutely fine. You see, you're even further north than I am, so I understand what you're going through, if only a little bit. So, Emma, you didn't start life as a learning designer. So just tell me how you came to be involved in this business of learning design for organizations.
Yeah, okay. Now, I started as a nurse, actually. So I've been spending most of my career within healthcare, so working in an acute care setting in one of the larger hospitals in Sweden. And started fairly early on working with training initiatives within the healthcare setting, working with my own profession and different other professions, and creating training initiatives basically for healthcare. Very much event-based, very much focused on critical skills, but also, of course, like leadership, team management, patient safety, and all of that. But I felt that I was always missing a little bit. So, like working with these events, like we were training very good, like training scenarios, getting good focus on doing the right stuff, but never really knew if that would then multiply out on the workplace. So were they actually going to use what we learned them in the classroom back on the job?
And one of the things that you're doing, because you told me before we came on air that you were doing quite a lot of simulations, and I think quite a lot of organisations would think, well, if we can get simulations into a classroom environment, then that's really good. That's going to go into the workplace because the simulation gives people all sorts of areas to practice, helps them to see how it will work in principle as well as in the practical environment. So, you know, they get a real good experience, and therefore they're much likely to change what they do. But even though you were doing that, you were still concerned that that wasn't translating into practice at the point of need where they're actually working with real life patients.
No, but I think that once again, simulation is a magnificent tool, and I still use it whenever I get the opportunity. But I still need something more, and I need something to build that kind of confidence and the competence to do that more on the job, and to get feedback also on the job that I'm doing it well. Because in the classroom setting, it's usually always a classroom setting. People like. Quite often I got comments like, yeah, but I wouldn't do that on the job. Like the reason why I might have failed in the training was because it didn't look like back home. And when you get into those situations, it's hard to argue. But when you can get a training to come out to the workplace, whether you're actually doing it on the job, then it's so much easier to figure out where do I need help, what issues do we have to kind of get that behavior moving to and get the results that we are after. Because no one wants to do, or I don't think anyone wants to do a poor job.
So what is it that you do now? Because you've now moved away from the healthcare setting. You're working for Promote in part of their learning design team. And what's your focus now in terms of the work that you do? And how has that changed your attitude to, your thinking about, and your approach to solving workplace performance issues with your clients?
Yeah, I think that the biggest piece of the puzzle that I kind of was missing prior was the result and the performance outcome bit. So like I always worked with the learning outcome. So like I knew what I was going to train my participants in and how I was going to kind of give them what they needed. But I didn't really know how to really transfer that into using it on the work and what kind of result that in the end would kind of contribute to. So what I do today is kind of, number one, we start with the end in mind. So we start with, but if we're going to do this training, what results what are we after? What do we want to happen? If we do this training properly, what do we need to happen? And when we have that, when we know where we're going, then we kind of backtrack from that. So we backtrack to, okay, but if this is the result, what kind of actions, what kind of behaviors do we need to target? Because there's a lot of things going on a work day. Like I do a lot of things in my work, but not everything is crucial, or it will not have the highest impact on the results. So kind of backtrack which moments in your work have the highest impact to reach these results. And when we have been able, and this is not something that we just like make up or define solo, we involve the organization, we talk to many different stakeholders to kind of target that behavior. When we have that, then I know my learning outcomes. Then I know what kind of knowledge and skills I need to equip the participant with to be able to perform in that specific situation. So we are kind of working a lot leaner today with targeting results, behaviors, and the learning. So we're not equipping them with all these nice to have stuff. We give them what they need to move the needle.
Part of that stakeholder engagement must be about what do people know now? What are people doing now? What is good? What is less good?
Yes.
What could be better? What could be smoother, more efficient?
Yes.
What could be done more quickly with a little bit more reorganization around the edges? So there's a component there of what you're doing, which is around assessment, I guess, however gently that is done. And then a focus around saying, well, here's therefore what absolutely needs to happen. Really stripped back in terms of the amount of content and the amount of time spent managing that. But one of the things that I know you get involved in is this idea of staggering the journey, moving it from little stuff to the next stuff to the stuff that goes a little bit further. Just tell me a little bit more about how that works within the practice that you encourage your customers, your clients to work on.
Yeah, so once again, trying to differentiate from the traditional, like when we only have an event. So I have a certain of hours to kind of equip them and train them, and then they are like, off you go, use it. We work in a very different way where we give them like small pieces of knowledge to be used in a specific scenario where they will be allowed, because we are talking about behavioral change when we're working with these kind of programs, where they are allowed to try several times in a safe environment. Where it might be a classroom, it might be a webinar. Start there, equip them with pre-knowledge so they know and they can try, they can use it, get good qualified feedback directly when they do it. And then we try to escalate the difficulty of using that specific behavior on the job, but maybe start smaller. Do it with a colleague, do it with someone that you trust. Try it in a situation where it's safer, but still more challenging than just being in the classroom. And then when you have done that, got good feedback on that, then you can start using it on the job and really try it out. Because you need to build that competence and confidence to do it. Because otherwise it's so easy to do what we have done previously, because we kind of know that is a little bit safe. I know what the outcome will be if I do it. The other thing is a bit scary.
Absolutely. And I think part of the reasons that sometimes then that transition into the workplace gets scary is because people make the mistake of trying to do the really hard stuff. It's like, I've got a new tool bag. I'm going to go and, it's like if I don't know, learn to do some carpentry and go, okay, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to build this Edwardian wardrobe for people, and it's going to be beautifully veneered and very well carved and all the rest of it. And I've only just picked up a chisel 2 days earlier. This is not going to be something I can do. So you start small, you do that incremental change, try it out in a safe place, a safe-ish place, and then less safe place until such time as it feels like I'm gaining in confidence as well as capability. And that process of engaging with more stakeholders than just the people who do the job, that's quite important for you, isn't it, in terms of working with a wider group of stakeholders. How wide does that stakeholder group go, Anna?
It depends. It depends on the behavior. It depends on the organization. It depends on what kind of scenario we are asking them or needing them to do. But it can be everything from, like, of course, the manager is a very vital part in this. So having the manager involvement, knowing what's going on, being curious, asking how it's going, following up. What has happened? What have you seen? What are your thoughts going forward? You have your peers that you work with day to day, where you have relationship, where you can get good advice. When you reflect on, I did this. What did you do? Like, can I get any tips on how to kind of solve this problem going forward? You might have a mentor, you might have a subject matter expert, get people to understand that they have more resources than just a PDF, that they can ask people, and see it as a strength, because the person that you also go and ask for advice will be proud because you ask them for advice, and they can get some good knowledge sharing and best practice involved when we are learning, and this is continuously, this never stops.
No.
Or at least we don't want it to.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things that you and I have spoken about before is this idea of getting the managers or the subject matter experts or the mentors to be really quite proactive, to actually go and look for questions rather than just sit passively awaiting people coming through the door and going, I'm having a problem with, can you help me? Because that's not the way it works in organizations, is it? You have to go and seek out the questions rather than wait for them to come to you sometimes.
Now, we very often say that it takes a village. Like it takes a village to move the needle when it comes to behavioral change, that more people need to be curious. And like, of course, if a subject matter expert has heard something about this training initiative and come and ask curious questions, that's gonna nudge something in a very, very positive way. So getting information out on why we're doing it, and how other people can contribute is, I think, also very, very important.
Absolutely. Emma Stenman from Promote International, thank you ever so much for joining us on Learning Now TV. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Robin, for having me. It's been a pleasure.
This month, Stella completes her series on the brain and learning. That's rather sad, actually. It's been a fantastic series and it's been well received by everybody. But once it's finished, we can package it as a complete little program or course that you can share around your organization. But the focus this month, is on forgetting, why the brain forgets, why that is very helpful, and why it's not so helpful. So, techniques for remembering, techniques for forgetting, final installment from Stella Collins.
So, welcome back to Neuroscience for Learning. And this episode is all about how our brains are designed to forget. Remember Tina Harris? She's back with some top tips on memory and how we can help to support memory. But why do our brains forget? It's because it's important. We can't possibly remember everything, so we need to forget some stuff. But of course, at work, we also need to remember stuff. So what's happening in our brain when we're remembering? The piece of our brain that's really important for memory is our hippocampus, and that's buried here in the heart of your cerebrum. Remember that brain? And the hippocampus is like a conductor of memory. It doesn't store memory for the long term. What it does is it sorts and processes memories. So as information comes into your brain during the day, it goes to your hippocampus and it kind of holds it there until you go to sleep at night, at which point it's filtered, it's sorted, and it's distributed across various parts of your brain. So any sensory input that came into your brain is stored in your sensory cortices. Our brains are multisensory, and senses really help us remember. We tag some memories with really strong emotions. So if it's happy, if we're sad, if we're fearful, if we're, just feeling kind of halfway today, the things that we remember strongly are the things that we tag with strong emotions. It says, remember this or forget it. Ebbinghaus shows us that if something's not relevant and we don't repeat it, then we tend to forget it, which is why we forget so many things. So there are things we can do to overcome the forgetting curve and to help her remember stuff that is, perhaps less emotional in its context. Some of that work stuff. So, Tina, what do you do to design in and to support memory and prevent the forgetting?
So there's a number of things we can do. Firstly, what we want to do is deliberately build in memory triggers into the programs themselves. So thinking about what types of memory triggers there are. We've already spoken in motivation about linking. You've just mentioned emotions, novelty. All of those are really good memory triggers. You can also incorporate anchors, so things like mnemonics, or things that help people to anchor the learning to something, can be really helpful. And stories. So if we think about stories and all the things they incorporate in terms of emotions, senses, patterns, really, really impactful stories. And then there's the repetition piece, which you spoke about. Now, you need to encourage recall, not recognition. So what we want people to do is to use those neural pathways again and again. And that's why what's quite interesting, it's quite good to forget, because we want people to, the pathway to stop firing and then be refired, to get those neural pathways stronger. So actually having spaces between is really important. So doing things like reviews in a next module for previous learning means that people have a bit of space and then they review and recall it again. We use spaced repetition questions for particular knowledge pieces. So all of those can really help with remembering.
Thank you very much, Tina. So next time you are worried about forgetting something, use Tina's tips to help you remember it. See you next time. Bye-bye.
I'm going to talk about live online facilitation today. And who better to do that than with Claire Madeley? Claire is an expert on online facilitation. She's been doing it for many, many years. She's a learning solutions consultant, and she's chosen to do this for some good reasons that we'll come up and discuss in this interview. But let's start by saying to Claire, what attracted you to it? Why do you think it's important, and why are you doing it?
Well, thank you for having me here today. I much appreciate it, Nigel. And live online learning has grown leaps and bounds, hasn't it, over the many years? And just, I suppose, back from the history of it, over about, near on 20 years ago, I started online facilitating. And you can imagine what it was like back in the day, as it were. So it's come on leaps and bounds. And I'm just passionate about our way of learning because it's so many benefits to it. Enormous amount of benefits for everyone involved. And I think that's why I'm passionate about it. But it has to be engaging and it has to have the right ingredients.
Tell us a little bit about that, Lynn. So how do you make it engaging and what do you think the right ingredients are?
Well, I would say it's like baking a perfect cake. You can collect all of those wonderful, good quality ingredients and you mix it up to perfection. So those good quality ingredients that you would pop in a cake, for online delivery, it would be your voice. You'll pay attention to the way you're using your voice. Engagement is crucial. And also, when we're thinking about what we are seeing, so the design of what you're showing, and mix those all up to perfection, and you will have the ingredients of a perfectly baked cake.
Excellent. So they're the ingredients. And what are the benefits of good online facilitation? Is it that it engages the learner? Is it that you get through the business faster? Is it that you have better results? What are the outcomes of great facilitation?
Great online live facilitation has so many benefits for everyone, and that includes employers, customers, learners, everyone involved. Yes, we always think about the costs involved, and they're going to be more minimal, obviously, but what about timely? Having something delivered and a quick turnaround when something is urgent, the timely effect of that is just crucial. But do you know what the biggest key, I think, is comfort for everyone? Because the accessibility, it is available at our fingertips. And so there's less travel, there's everything of all the benefits that come into it, but for everyone involved. So that is why it's a winner.
What makes things go wrong? What do you think are the big, not mistakes, but the big errors of judgment that people make that make things go wrong?
I think I can refer back to my little cake. There's going to be times when things don't go to plan. That is the same wherever you are and however you are delivering any kind of session. So thinking a bit, if your cake is overbaked or flat, what you're going to do about it. So you have to have adaptability and you have to think on your feet quite a lot of the time. You can't be rigid, and adding that flow. You can't just say, oh, hold on, let's go and open up a poll. And what's your thoughts here? Oh, hold on, I've got to load that poll. Wait a minute, sorry, it's not the correct poll. Wait a minute, you're going to lose that engagement. You can lose engagement so easily in an online session. So you must make it flow as easy as possible. And that comes with practice, preparation, and a bit more practice.
Yeah. Do you script? Do you think you should script things, or do you just make sure you've got all the segments lined up and all the resources? How do you do that?
I think that's a question that I get asked quite a lot. Do we go from scripts? Because especially nowadays, with everything surrounding our online environment and our platforms that we use, we can upload PowerPoint where we can see the notes section, and people are drawn to write fully scripted and read from it. You're going to sound just robotic. You're not going to have that connection that you need. You're going to hear it, and that will cause disengagement. So whenever you go and practice, it always reminds me of going back at school when I'm revising something, just like we would practice anything, and get it down to the minimal prompts where you can then expand on them. You need a conversational style, because that's what's interesting to listen to. A robotic scripted plan is not, it's going to be boring, and we're not going to listen to anything that is boring.
So planning is absolutely crucial. Getting all your resources lined up, but don't script. Talk naturally. Communicate as if you're talking to a person, not reading something out to them. That's the message, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So being in front of a camera, being in your home office, wherever you are talking as if you're around the table having a cup of tea with people. That's how you want to communicate. So, use your body language like you'd normally do. Use your hands, smile, interact, and look through that camera. Just be as a person. And when I first started, to try and make myself feel that I was still talking to people, and I don't know what your tips are on for TV, but I would just have something behind the camera that would make me smile. There was my daughter's beautiful little teddy bear that I absolutely love, and it made me smile. So those kind of things can help as actually bring about that sort of natural element. When you feel like maybe sometimes you're talking to a brick wall, you don't want to be able to come across like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. When I was doing blue screen work, so I'm interviewing a blank wall, and then a person is injected into that space. What we did was we used a puppet of Sooty, and we put Sooty on the top of the microphone, so that I was talking to Sooty, and that, funnily enough, just that little change gives you a focus, and it gives you something to react to, rather than blank screen stuff. And I think a lot of people in live online facilitation find that the kind of overwhelming flatness of it all, you need to kind of create dimensions, don't you? Like imagine a person or direct it to one of the people present, even though they can't tell you're directing at them, but have them in mind. So you get that kind of human connection. That works much better than just trying to be I suppose, professorial and distanced and lecturing. You've got to kind of engage and be more conversational. Don't you agree?
Oh, the way we use our voice in this medium is massive, I think. And in where you're face to face with someone, I think you have to add on a little bit more energy to the way you're using your voice and your personality, because the camera will suck about 25% out. I'm sure you might agree there, but it does suck a bit. So even if you sound just a little bit try and practice. And the best way you can upskill is to practice. Record yourself. Open up Zoom, open up Teams, run through your session, run through your presentation, and listen back. And don't be too critical of yourself, but you will see very quickly what is going well, but equally what is not. And ask for feedback. It's a gift.
These are really good tips. So if you record yourself and you sit with somebody that you trust and you go over it together, that's a great way, isn't it? Because then you see yourself and you see what they're saying, and they see what they're seeing in the moment. And so you end up kind of seeing yourself rather differently than you would just looking at it all on your own, and getting much more insights and information. And taking, not try to be perfect, but just taking on board some of those comments, like losing verbal tics, which most of us unwittingly kind of absorb. So let's just finish on a couple of really good tips. What, given your experience, what would you say to someone who's saying, I'm starting off on this, Claire, what should I do first?
I would recommend to practice with your chosen software to get comfortable enough so it's not going to add a barrier to your delivery of whatever it might be. Because you might have practiced that presentation, that session, and well-oiled, and then you go to deliver it and you're not sure about how to use the function. So it's going to be a barrier with the flow of your session. So that is one tip. And let's think there's a variety now of platforms out there. Huge amount. Get comfortable with that. Practice beforehand. Preparation. We underestimate preparation. You need to be there on time to greet people. It's a simple thing, but you need to be there. You can't be setting up while people are arriving. You have to give yourself enough time. And I think there's so many people that will literally log on a couple of minutes before and a bit flustered.
Relax and enjoy it. It's actually, as you said, powerful, engaging, and it can be an awful lot of fun, just as it's been talking to you today. Thank you.
No, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for having me.
Well, Kate, that's another month done. We're not back until the 30th of November. What did you like? What are the highlights for you from this week?
Well, I mean, I'm very biased when it comes to Mike Bollinger, not just because he's a cornerstone person. I've known Mike for several years, and the research that he's doing is turning into a longitudinal study now, and that's really interesting to see how things move, or actually more to the point, don't move. But I think what stood out for me this month was just the contrast. Things like Claire talking about facilitation. It's what I would call a brilliant basic. Some of those things, whether they're online, whether they're in person, those skills are perennially going to be used within L&D. But I think to contrast it out against, the news, the bits and pieces of research, always thinking about the context in which we're using them and how we're using them across the organisation. I really love that contrast this month.
I agree. And what I really enjoyed was the beginning to focus not just on individuals and how they get what they need, but the organizational context that helps individuals get what they need, and also the power of bringing people together and helping them essentially sort their own problems out. So really good stuff. Kate, any events coming up? I can't believe there won't be at this time of year.
This time of year, yes. I've just got back from lots of travels, and I think, it's been really interesting looking at the themes and, some of the trends coming out of these events, and then tying it back to just what we've been talking about really with these brilliant basics, because, AI is dominating the agenda across almost everything at the moment. But it is still about, what do you want to achieve? What outcomes do you want? Don't just have a whizzy bit of kit for the sake of having a new shiny new tool, So I think that context is really great. So we're off to London for the Learning Technologies Awards on the 15th of November. Be very interesting. I love to see the case studies that come out of that and the success stories. 17th of November, our friends at the Learning Network have their Connect event in London.
I'll be there. I'll be there at that, Kate. I've been invited. I can't believe it. I'm very pleased.
I would also like to go along as well. 22nd to the 24th of November, slightly earlier this year, is Online Educa in Berlin. 5th to the 7th of December is the Learning 2023 event in Orlando. Whew, then we all get to catch our breath. And then we're straight through to 23rd of February, where it is the Learning and Performance Awards from the LPI. So we're a little break over Christmas to collect ourselves. And I guess, what we would always say about learning is to, reflect on what we've heard and try and apply it into practice.
Absolutely excellent. Yes. And we'll be back on the 30th of November. 30th of November. So see you all then. Both? No, more than that. See you all then.
See you then.